Hey everyone, so I'm Uchechi, the writer of Marhabtain Arabic, where you come to figure out how to self-study Arabic. And today I have such a special video for everyone. This is a very good friend of mine, Rose Gold. Rose Gold is the person who put me on, and therefore put us on for immersion. And Rose Gold is the only person I know who has, like I personally know, who has used the immersion methods and actually become fluent in the language that they were studying. So Rose Gold studied Chinese and is like a native level Chinese speaker. I've seen her like in her element in China and it's really incredible. So I really wanted to talk with you today, Rose, for the fact of maybe getting through some big questions that are on my mind and maybe are also on the mind of some of the readers for this blog. I know that you did not study Arabic. I don't think you've ever studied Arabic, but it's all relatable. Yeah. So I hope that as you're listening that you really are able to take what Rose can say about Chinese and put it into your Arabic study. And I will try and center it around Arabic as much as possible as well.
You can be the interpreter.
Yes. So the first question I want to ask is it's just an intro. So tell us, like, how did you find the AJATT method, which for people who have never heard of it, that's all Japanese all the time. It's morphed into another blog by some other writers called The Mass Immersion Effect, which then became Refold, and I just call it like immersion. But it kind of really, in terms of like internet world, I think it really started with AJATT many years ago. So can you tell us, how did you find it and why did you like decide to actually follow this crazy ass method?
Excellent questions that I often don't quite know the answer to, but I found it when I had become very frustrated with language classes as they're conventionally taught at a Chinese weekend school, mostly for Chinese American students. I had started taking classes. I was the only white kid in the school. I was very excited every Sunday, and all my classmates were like, "You are so annoying. We are forced to be here." But I wasn't learning very quickly, and I didn't really enjoy using a textbook because it felt like this textbook is like this little condensed 50-page thing, and this language is this constantly moving world out there. So I started looking for polyglot blogs. I just thought, you know what? I think I can pick up languages, and people teach themselves languages. How do they do it?
Yeah.
And I was just on these forums and I got into like the deep void of probably where a lot of the listeners here have been, and kind of murky waters of self-immersion and self-teaching. And I saw all sorts of strange methods of like things. And then I found AJATT just on a forum. Someone posted AJATT and I got onto the website. This was early AJATT days. The website looked very different. And
Really, it's still crazy right now.
It's crazy still. It just had like the core. I mean, it's so eclectic, and I love just how it's almost like the language is itself. It just free flowing.
Yes.
And I just fell into it, and I was just inspired by his story because it's really a testimonial to his own learning of Japanese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old were you when this started?
This was my freshman year of high school into the summertime. So I must have been 14 or 15.
Like 14, 15. What I love is like, you know, I don't know if there are any 14 or 15-year-olds who are listening to this right now who are like Gen Zers, but just even the way that you found AJATT speaks to the power of the internet that we had access to when we were kids versus like the very curated internet that we have here. That like we used to have like forums, people of different backgrounds just coming together and talking about things, and that's how it like leads you to someone who like he was not trying to be an influencer, he was not trying to be anything, he was just like, look,
Instagram.
Yeah, no, it's like no flash. He was just like, look, I'm trying to help y'all out because y'all struggling in your language class.
Yeah.
And eventually when we were in college, you put me on. You were like, yo, this is what you need to do.
Yeah, well, that's crazy. And now look at you.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the AJATT method. Again, for people who never read AJATT, there's now Refold or the Mass Immersion Effect. I talk about it in certain ways on my blog as well. But I want to orient it around AJATT because it's so intense. Like, and he's real about the fact that like, okay, this is intense, this is intensive. And I feel like with other people that I've read who were trying to synthesize the method or make it more approachable to people, there's some things that they like kind of take out this, take out that, just so that language learners will feel more encouraged to keep on going. But the question I have, because I'm still on this journey, is what parts of the AJATT method are actually crucial? Like, you need to be doing this. If you don't do this, it's like you're going to have a hard time. And what parts of that method are like, well, you don't have to do that?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. The first thing that comes to my mind of must do is just humans learn languages essentially the same way, neurologically and socioculturally. If you're not reading a language, you're not going to be able to write in it. And if you're not able to listen to a spoken language, or if it's a signed language, if you're not able to understand the signs, you're not even going to be able to sign and produce the language, period.
Yeah.
Just how we work. I haven't yet met a person who's like, I speak fluent Italian, but I can't understand a word they say back to me. That just doesn't happen,
it just
right?
Doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. But how many times do we hear people say, I understand Italian, I grew up and my parents, I understand Arabic, I just don't speak it very well.
Right.
All the time we hear that. And I think when people say that, they often say it sort of in a self-deprecating way, as if that's bad.
Yeah.
But that's simply a stage of language acquisition, to be able to understand, but still gradually increasing output and articulation of how to speak outwardly. That's a stage, and that's a beautiful stage, because it's actually quite far along the journey. To be able to understand spoken language is pretty quick.
Yeah.
So it's a good stage to be in. But so the essentials are, if you want to be able to write in the language, you got to be reading it. If you want to be able to speak in the language, from my experience, I had to be listening to it all the time.
Yeah.
For quicker acquisition. Now that's where we can get into the non-essentials, right? How fast do you want to learn this language? For the listeners, like, how quickly do they want to learn Arabic? How willing are they to spend their weekends in Arabic land?
Right.
With all of their English speaking friends, or whatever country, whatever language that they tend to live in. It's choosing to live your life in another language. It's a significant choice that involves the friends you hang out with. Yes. I alienated people in high school who did not watch Chinese dubs with me, and that had consequences. So I just say that as like, nobody needs to do that to learn a language. It's just, it could take 10 years instead of 2.
And so if I were to fill in the gaps, I feel like you might be reiterating something that, what's his name, Katsumoto says is kind of like, he has this one post that's like, language is like peeing, like the more you drink, the more you pee, right?
Metaphors.
I know, and they're just so funny, right? But also like, if you're a bit dehydrated, you're not going to pee that much, right? So I feel like what you're saying as well is, if you do want to move faster with either your writing, you're going to need to read a lot. If you want to move faster with your speaking, then you're going to need to listen a lot.
Yeah.
And that's just that correlation.
Yeah.
He has some posts where he's like, but you should be listening like in your sleep.
Which I tried.
Did it go well?
It didn't go well. I didn't sleep.
Right. Like, if you later on, because by the time we came to college, you spoke Chinese very, very well. Yeah, obviously you'd spent like most of your high school years, but obviously you were also in like a very English speaking environment. We were friends, our friends were friends. And so you couldn't spend as much time just immersing as possible, but I'm sure you were still immersing, right?
I was still, just to a lesser extent. I kind of loosened my rigidity of AJATT when I got to Princeton. I was more like, all right, I want to have a social life that involves English. But this is where I now look back and I see that. So I feel like the media can be a surrogate to family, friends speaking the language with us.
Okay, so tell me, I don't really know what you mean. What do you mean?
What I mean by that is, I grew up in suburban Colorado with very few Chinese speakers, just in the daily through my life, and in an English-speaking high school. Media of music, podcasts, radio, TV shows, and movies in Chinese were the stand-in for actually being a high schooler in China who was going to regularly have a community of Chinese speakers. But it was very important to quickly find the real people to augment and eventually substitute media. Because let's be honest, it's fun to watch a movie, but if the movie is our sole connection to the language, then we don't interact with the movies. We don't interact with the movie. We don't talk back to the movie and get interaction.
Right.
And the strongest saturation value, and I mean that in terms of like the best value I got out of learning in an interaction or time spent, was sitting with a person in conversation, hearing them, really watching their facial expressions. They're giving me more context when I don't get it. And it's fun because we're social creatures. So when I got to Princeton, I had language tables, which were dining room.
Yeah, we had that. I remember those.
Chinese table. We all speak Chinese. I loved those. I would do those once or twice a week. I would like stalk the Chinese lectures and like became friends with many of them.
Yeah.
Who they also were like eager to like, you know, make friends with Americans. And it was wonderful. And I would just meet Chinese graduate students because there were more grad students from China than undergrad. And that's what became the immersion. So it was really then using the language a lot more. But my early days in high school where I don't know a lot of Chinese people, my language level is so low, I'm going to start with cartoons and songs. And then once I can understand basic conversation, it's important that I'm starting to get some real world interaction.
And so to that point, because I think for me, at least to another question that I have about when to start speaking and how to use speaking as a part of your immersion, I felt in this year as entering 2021, after being just like so immersed in Arabic throughout 2020, I emerged in 2021 and I was like, I can keep on doing this, but I need to like meet other people. Like the only reason why I'm studying this is to interact with other people. And so as much as I love my immersion and I love the way that you described it. They were like the surrogates, like some of the actors that, I mean, we've talked about like my programs, like some of the actors that I watch, I feel like I know them, you know?
They're like your Arabic moms and dads.
Yeah, you know? And then when I meet other people, real people, I'm like, but I just need to know you. Like, I would love to spend less time here to spend more time there.
Yeah.
But so I have two questions about speaking. The first one is, to make best use of that in-person conversation, did you need that very strong just immersion foundation? That's the question. That's the first question. Or could you have just been like, I'm kind of good at this, but I just want to interact with people? And that's where the AJATT method or the refill method is very sort of stringent about, no, this comes later. What do you think?
So I needed the education of how language acquisition works because people don't understand how language acquisition works. When I go to the in-person conversation, people often try to teach us the language in the way they learned a foreign language.
Yeah.
So Chinese people I met wanted to kind of correct me in ways or really focus on form and no, this is the grammar. And then we started speaking in English and here's how to use this particle because they thought that's what would be helpful. Until I encountered AJATT, I didn't understand that I needed just lots of interaction, lots of listening. Yeah. So it wasn't so much that I needed an immersion foundation of the immersion, a certain amount of hours before I go out into the real world or anything like that. I needed to understand better. I mean, it's silly in a way, right? We're all learning languages, and yet so few of us understand the linguistics of language acquisition.
Yes.
Right? If we want to be excellent tennis players, or we want to be excellent makeup artists, it would serve us well to understand the field, to understand the history and just the actual principles behind skill building, period. Right. But we don't often do that. We have lots of things we just take for granted of textbooks and stuff like that. So what helped me was just knowing that, okay, I need a language mom. I need a language dad. I need a language auntie and ayi and shushu.
Yeah.
I need those people in real life. And for me, that was Lee, who is the owner of South China Restaurant. Shout out to Lee. I'm really grateful for her being my Chinese mom, my language mom, because I would spend a lot of time there in high school, after school, and she would just talk to me. And I would hear the cooks in the restaurant who were speaking, and I felt like I became part of a community. And Stephen Krashen talks about who inspired Katsumoto.
Exactly.
Profiles an amazing learner of Hebrew in LA,
Yeah.
who I think was originally from Mexico, and he worked in a restaurant of people from Israel, and he learned Hebrew by being in the restaurant community. He was taken in as family. He would go to the birthday parties and the weddings and the. So anyway, I think community is more important now as I look back. Then in the beginning, I thought it was all about my solo immersion, which is like all about me. And now I'm more about like, find the community. We can have surrogate, celebrity parents through these shows, which is a great supplement, and it's a great beginning, and it's fun. And we can't constantly be in community with the speakers of the language typically while we're living in a home country or wherever we are.
Wow. Okay. I love that, because that enlightened so much for me, and also how I feel right now. Of
like get out there and use that.
So I mean, we had a conversation a few weeks ago about language partners, and now I have this really good friend named Shadi who we talk every day, and like we know about each other's life, and it's already been feeding me so much. And I have a few friends here in the town where I live. I'm moving, and I think there'll be way more people that can be like in my community with me. But I think that also, for the Arabic listeners who are here, a big part of learning Arabic in a traditional way is to just study abroad. And I've talked about on the blog how, for me, I don't even know if study abroad is the most useful thing to do, depending on the language that you're learning, depending on your stage. But particularly because we think we're gonna go there and we're gonna have community, but our community is usually the language learners who are just like us. And so
we're here where we live.
Right. And I would hope that if someone is listening and they're still thinking about study abroad, then you can start to craft your journey there around community of the people that you really need to be hearing every single day, rather than, foreigners like me or foreigners like Rose. So that I love that community aspect, and it's just hitting me where I am. If I was going to say feeling the most challenges right now, is like, I'm like, this is life. Like this is my TV. Like that's one way that I've learned, and I keep on learning. But life happens like in the breaths, like it happens in the conversations. It happens in the facial expressions. It just like, it's the observation. So I love that.
To use something that we also both enjoy, I know, is meditation. And so we could use the analog of going and doing a 10-day intensive Vipassana meditation retreat.
Yes.
That's kind of like going to the country for an immersion program. It's really intense. It can be a great jump start of the language. And then we come back, and it's like, we're not going to just attain greater mindfulness by that 10 days. And now the rest of our life is set. Like we have to integrate daily sitting, daily practice. So, it's kind of like, okay, you can do the meditation retreat, but it takes daily, meditation on your cushion to actually build that muscle.
Right. And that goes back to your point. Now I'll move on to another question about why it's important to understand what language acquisition actually is, so that in any scenario that we're in, whether you're watching the TV show or you're working at a restaurant or you're going to the birthday party or you're talking with a friend on an app or whatever, how you need to address it because of how we're trying to learn, rather than just like adapting to all these other people's interpretations of language, or just not even using that opportunity in the strongest way possible. So I do write a lot on the blog about what is this thing? Why do we do it? How do we break this down? And some of those posts are the most widely read. And then some of them, like, I feel like, I don't know if people like want to read about it, but I'm like, yo, this is like why we're doing this.
Yeah, to understand the foundation.
Yeah. So a question that is on the mind, I think, of every learner is, how long does this take? How long will I really be doing this?
Are we there yet?
Are we there? Like, Mom, are we there yet?
Are we fluent yet? Yeah.
Right. And I think that question can be so overwhelming that either people don't start, or they start and they get burned out, or they get discouraged, like, I'm not doing anything. So how would you answer that question? How long does it take to reach a deep level of fluency or near native fluency?
It takes what it takes. The worst and least favorite answer of the world. It takes how long it takes for the person's goals and for the person's motivation level. And in a sense, we could take it, this is going to sound terrible, so just hear me out. It takes a lifetime. Don't freak out.
We're
But
like,
what I mean is we
"No."
don't want to learn a language just to forget it 20 years from now. I don't want to spend all this time with Arabic, for example, so that 10 years from now, I forget it all.
Oh my
And
God.
I start over again. Not to say that we truly forget, because there's muscular, there's memories, but I started changing my whole approach when I taught English. I lived with this actor in China, and that experience was very important for me to understand. It's actually all about motivation for the long term. Like, why is this language important to me for my life and my values as a human being?
Yeah.
And you and I have talked a little bit about this. It can go to a spiritual level. Like, what
Yes.
is this all about? Is it
Yes.
about looking cool? Is it about making more money? Is it about impressing someone? Those things come and go.
Yeah.
A language is for a lifetime. I use Mandarin all the time. It brings joy into my life. It brings purpose and opportunities to be of service for the past 13 years. And for the rest of my life, it will continue to do so. So it takes really however long it takes, but the journey is so fun if we can focus on the present. It sounds cliche to bring in the mindfulness meditation again,
Yeah.
but when we focus on how long it takes, we're not in the present anymore.
Yeah.
We're not enjoying where we are today with the language. The fact that we can understand that sentence that we heard. Yay, hooray.
Right?
Like celebrating.
Yes.
And AJATT Katsumoto mentions, like, celebrate the little wins.
Yes.
Celebrate that you know something today that you didn't know yesterday.
Yes.
Instead of, when am I going to be fully fluent and able to move to Morocco and get a job that I want?
Yeah.
That's going to happen if we stay here, stay with the work, and just stay with, what new vocab can I learn today? What new TV show can I discover today?
Yes.
What new person can I go stalk and meet and hang out with and talk to? I don't really mean stalk, but you know what I mean. Like, who can I go?
No, I mean stalk. I'm looking for like, I'm looking
girl,
for
like,
friends.
hi.
Yeah.
Can we practice Arabic?
You're like, please. What I love about that, and you're so right. Like, I feel like when I started at the beginning of the pandemic, when I really got serious, I felt myself wanting to rush or be there or something like that. And one, it was like, I felt like I was having these competing interests, because on one hand, I was so enjoying what I was doing, and on the other hand, I was making myself not enjoy what I was doing.
Make ourselves miserable when we focus on the
Right.
destination.
And on a destination that really is truly long.
And what is the destination?
Right?
Yeah,
I think
fun.
at even if it's as simple as being able to go from not being able to truly string a sentence together to string a sentence together on your own without thinking, that's still going to take a long time. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's still going to take a long time. And so what I find about the approach of just like, celebrate the wins, have the fun, feel the joy, is that it keeps you in the game longer. And when you're in the game longer, then you're much more likely to be moving. Like,
exactly. The game is literally just don't stop. And Katsumoto says it.
Yeah.
Don't stop being exposed to the language, even if it's a tiny, even if it's a 5-minute. This is great for exercise people too. Like, there are days where I'm like, I can't do an hour-long workout, so forget it. Yes. And I've learned, just do 5 minutes up and down the stairs.
Yes.
Break out the jump rope and hit it for 10 minutes. That's better than nothing. It's going to get my heart rate up and get the endorphins going. Listen to 10 minutes of Arabic music rather than nothing, because you can't do a 2-hour movie. And I used to feel that way often, like, oh, I can't have it all, so I'm not going to. So it really is about the little wins. And then I love the metaphor too of a road trip. Road trips are more fun when we stop in the town that we're crossing through, and we're like, this is a really cute little thing at the gas station. Like, lots of stops make a road trip fun. And I would say the same. This is a big, long, beautiful road trip for the listeners. Congratulations to all of you who are deciding on this courageous road trip toward Arabic land, which is beautiful and amazing. And there's lots of little pit stops where you can fill up your tank and actually celebrate how far you've come and look back at the road behind you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think when I think about my road trip that I'm on, which is
Yeah.
really
Tell
like
me
has
about it.
been me and my programs that I've watched throughout the past sort of year and a half. I think the greatest joy, and I think I talked about this in one blog post, is that, you know, if I back up, why am I learning this? I'm learning this to connect with Arabic speakers and in a very personal way. Like my ideal would actually be to be able to get in a car with friends in Lebanon or Syria and just drive and have some beers and like have some good conversation, have some laughs. And so that's a big part of why I focus so much on pop culture, because I'm like, that's what they're looking at. So that's what I want to look at. And one day in a car ride, I'm going to talk about it. Right. And what's been amazing is that, especially some of my Syrian friends that I have, that's the stuff that we do talk about. We're like, yo, did you see this thing in this show? Or did you hear this thing, that song? And I can pass things on and they're like, oh, this is so amazing. I didn't know about it. Or
You're
they
like,
can
you know
pass
more about pop culture
than
here than me.
I do. And I'm
Yeah, that
like,
happens to me a lot with Chinese. Yeah.
right. And so, of course I want to continue my skills, but in terms of my actual goal, I feel like I get to reach it every day and then go deeper and go deeper and go deeper with it. And it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I couldn't have done that if I was just like, I'm just going to learn all the words and that's it. And now I can speak. Then I wouldn't have these really beautiful experiences day after day with real people who are now my friends, So,
Who are
um,
probably loving getting to meet you and
oh,
talk with you and understand the
yes.
world you've grown up in and why are you interested in their culture and language. Yeah.
So it's really amazing, and the things that you can exchange, things that you learn. Like my friend Shadi, who's Syrian, now living in Egypt, and he was in his fourth year of university. So we're about this. I mean, he's younger than me by a few years, but he's still a bit older than the average college student. And left in his fourth year because there's a conscription in Syria, and he doesn't want to fight in the war, and his friends are stuck there, and so he's like kind of made himself a refugee in order to find another life. And it's a kind of like we talk about it, it's like, yeah, it's like a kind of shitty story, but at the same time, like he just taught me so much about Syrian culture, history, like politics in one conversation.
From his
uh,
life story,
from
not from
his
a
life.
book, not from a podcast.
Exactly. And so there's just, as me and some friends always say, there's just so many levels to this shit. And that's why I want to like encourage everyone listening here that even though that journey can feel like, when is the road trip going to be over? If you really start to look at the stops that you're taking, then you can start to already feel the benefits of what it is that you've already done. And that's what I love so much. So I want to move on and then we'll wrap up. And I want to talk about what tools do you feel like are really important to have on this journey of self-study. Arabic is kind of the most annoying when it comes to this versus Chinese. Chinese has so many materials that are out there that you can just find the subtitles and it's standard, Arabic, I don't even want to go into it. So we really have to scrounge. I think you got to get scrappy, and I'm quite scrappy. So
I like that.
that's why my journey. That's why I keep on this journey, is because I'm willing to be very scrappy. But for someone who wants to start with self study and wants to be like, what are the most important materials or media or whatever that I need to start with? What are some of those things?
Well, spaced repetition system.
Okay, so you're
It's
gonna
like
need Anki,
nuts and bolts.
guys.
I'm an Anki girl. It's just the tool that's just no nonsense, massive download system that is free to use, accessible anywhere from the internet. I just don't mess around without a spaced repetition system
Yeah.
for language that especially has a different writing system,
Okay.
and especially is just going to be like higher level acquisition. I haven't used much of a spaced repetition system for Spanish. My level in Spanish is not like my level in Mandarin.
Yeah.
I have conversational fluency and basic proficiency, but I'm not going to be able to be really high level conversation.
Yeah.
So that's an important tool for those learners who are like, I'm in it for the long haul. I want your native level fluency in Arabic. or just really, really strong proficiency. The other tool is coaching. Yay!
Oh,
Talk about
okay.
coaching.
Talk about, this is very, what do you mean? Tell me more.
What I mean is having a coach, having a coaching relationship, either mentorship or coaching relationship that is not a language teacher. This is very important. Or could be a language teacher who is trained as a coach as well. And that's a trend now that we're seeing, which is language coaching, which is language teachers who are getting coach training. Because the biggest thing I've learned is that this journey is all about motivation. It's about values. It's about who we are as people. And coaching is an amazing modality to help us on a long and sometimes arduous, boring journey. There are just things like spaced repetition systems, not the most fun part of the journey, right? It's kind of like filling up a gas tank. It's not fun to do it, but it's sustaining energy to continue acquisition. So the tool of coaching, like finding, you know, a coaching community, someone who can be that support, and also, even if not finding an actual coach, asking yourself, like asking each of the listeners to ask yourself, what do I know about myself that will help me learn this language better? So there are going to be extroverts on the call, like me, guilty. Your magic is going to be out there talking to people, right? That's it. That's your acquisition is going to happen a lot in the out there, face to face. What's your name? Hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. That's going to be a lot of what happens. And so putting yourself in the physical spaces, public spaces where you're going to interact and encounter Arabic speakers is a crucial tool for extroverted, highly social people like me. The people who are like, that sounds like the worst tool in the world. Like I would rather like die or watch me die than go talk to people I've never met before. It's going to be the language exchange websites where you can have a very well-defined partnership with a person where you co-design 30 minutes and 30 minutes, you know, we exchange language. It's safer, it's one-on-one, it's better fit for maybe more introverted person, someone who likes that one-on-one depth rather than me, where a lot of my acquisition, once I got some basics under me, aside from the immersion of the media, was like, hey, what's your name? And that was my sweet spot. We call it like our wheelhouse. So asking each listener, what's your wheelhouse as a person for how you like to learn things? And adapt the method to you. You don't need to adapt yourself to this method dogmatically.
But what's at the heart of what you're saying is actually, how can you, based on your personality, find community through your personality? Because what you didn't say is, oh, you're introverted, just still watch your TV shows.
Lock yourself away at home and watch TV.
No, that's not what you said. Was still, how do you find community in the language with the level of interaction that you're willing to have or that you just can't have, depending on where you are?
I've realized that learning is relational, especially language. We can only learn language through relationships. Period. Effectively, it must be relational. So maybe the question is, how do you like to build relationships? And now put that in the context of Arabic.
Oh, wow. That's why I love you, because you just be so deep. and I've not thought about that. And I feel like that question is actually at the root of what I'm struggling with the most these days, of like, I know how to do my Enki, and it's actually getting really boring to me these days. Not because of the cards or anything. It's just like there's an energy, you know.
It's not fun to sit in front of, you know, input these.
I mean,
and that's where the, you know, just the accountability partner, the bookend or whatever, you know, I say bookend meaning, hey, I'm going to do my Enki for 15 minutes. Hey, I just did my Enki for 15 minutes.
And that's what you're talking about in terms of a coach. Like, do you know of any like language coaches, like that's like what they do full time or something like that?
Just I've seen folks online. It's something I'm thinking about for Chinese, and I know we've talked about it, but I don't know anyone. I mean, if you look it up, there's actually like an association now of language coaching where there are language teachers who are transitioning around coaching.
And I love that. I'm gonna write that
book
down.
Out there and like conference and stuff like that.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, guys. So everyone listening here, look up. I'm gonna look it up as well. The Association of Language Coaching, because I've felt so many things. One in the past few months has been that relational piece of it's time to build relationships, and it could also be like with that bookend of COVID and having been isolated for so long. It's like this has been great, and also I need to be with people.
Be out
Um,
there, yeah.
but also so many things in my life are changing right now, are changing really dramatically, equally with your life changing really dramatically. And we both know that having good coaches along the way are what helps us to orient back into our values and our goals. So I didn't know about this association, but I'm going to look into it. And my last question is just a very general, like, what advice do you have for anyone who's starting their self-study immersion journey today?
Well, my first, rather than advice, is to just tell them, hooray for you. You're choosing something that will change the rest of your life and probably change many other people's lives in magical ways that you can't see right now. This is a recovery slogan for addiction recovery, but don't quit before the miracle happens.
Hmm.
It's such a beautiful one.
That
Like
one,
my
that
sponsor
one.
used to tell me on hard days, she would say, you know, you can quit on a really good day, just don't quit on a really bad
That
day.
day.
So I say that it's kind of advice, but it's just like life, right? If you have a day where you're like, I don't understand any of this Arabic, this is so difficult, I want to go hang out with my friends speaking English, and I want to just like throw all of this in the trash because this is difficult and it's this sucks. Don't quit on that day, right? Quit on the day where you're like, I love Arabic, I'm understanding it all, I'm having fun, because then we won't want to quit.
Yes.
That's the whole point. But it's really like finding the support systems, finding the people who are going to bring you back to, and it could be a coach, it could be a mentor, it could just be a friend who brings you back to the why. Why are you doing this to begin with?
Yeah.
Why is this important to you? Because there were plenty of days with Chinese where I was really discouraged. I mean,
Yeah.
Chinese has a lot of regional accents and slang and dialects that influence Mandarin. And I showed up to China at 17 years old thinking I had learned Mandarin, and I showed up to Shenyang in the Northeast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why can't I understand anyone over the age of 40? This sucks.
Oh,
I
yes.
spent all of this for naught. And I needed to be reminded that language it's just the most beautiful, constantly changing, evolving world. So we are part of that because we're constantly evolving organisms. We need the consistency and the person or the support that will bring us back to why are we doing it?
Yes.
Don't quit on a bad day, and don't quit before the miracle happens.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rose.
And how about, can you tell just for listeners more about a little bit your story? And I know that this is
Oh,
kind of
yes.
the end of the interview, like what you do also, like for people who don't know, and then yeah.
Well, thanks for asking. In my mind, I'm like, anyone who finds this will know who I am, because I'm
They
like, how?
probably already know, I
Because
guess.
it's such a small world of Arabic, but at the same
True.
time, I constantly interact with people. Like this past week, I was on a Zoom call with a Jordanian, a young Jordanian, probably we're about the same age, who's coming to America to be a professor at West Virginia University. And I was like, how did you find me? And he was like, I don't even remember, you know? So, so it's like, you just never know who's out there. But, you know, what I do is that, I mean, I am basically an educator by trade. You know, I've worked either on the business side of education or I've worked in the classroom. But one way or another, for me, I find so much value in many things, but one thing in particular, which is giving people skills that cannot be taken away from them, period. And I think my mind is in this way because I'm a Black woman in America, because I'm a Black American, and because even despite my own efforts, my own intelligence or my own savvy, I have continuously been in spaces where I've seen people want to cut me down or take me out because I'm Black. And there are some things in this world that people can take away from you. but knowledge cannot be taken away from you. And
Mm.
knowledge, even if you're not in the right place, you can take that knowledge to the right place and change your life. With
Mm.
language in particular, I talk about in the blog why I started learning Arabic, but why I really encourage Americans to learn language in general is because most Americans do not learn languages, period. And because we don't know languages, because we don't speak any languages, that really allows our political systems to take advantage of us and then take advantage of other people around the world and or destroy their lives. And so, we've talked about with Arabic why it's so important for me is because I think I've always thought this since I was a child that the more of us who spoke Arabic, the more of us who made connections, who made relationships, real bonded relationships with people in the region, that we can help bring more peace, not necessarily to the region itself, but from our American perspective. We can be the ones saying, no, we're not sending any more bombs. We're not sending any more troops. We're not trying to wipe out villages. You can't just bomb a wedding and just give them some money and say, we're sorry,
Right.
But to do that, it takes more than what we call international relations. It
Mm.
takes, like you were saying, actual relationships,
Yeah.
real, like being able to see or hear a name and say, wow, that could be my friend, that could be Mustafa, that could be Nada, that could be, that could be Saeed, that could be, that could be anybody.
That's my
But
brother. That's my
that's my,
sister.
exactly, you know? So that's why I'm so, like, when I get to that why, that's my passion. That's why I spend all this random time trying to help people who want to learn Arabic stay in the race.
Mm.
Because so many of us give up long before we even started. I almost gave up many, many, many years. And it was because of the seed that you planted in my mind many years ago that even it grew years later, but it was because it was planted. And whenever I was ready, then it was able to fertilize and grow, and I could share with other people. So I hope that everyone who's listening to this feels encouraged to keep on going. That's really the main point. Like, you keep on going long enough, you reach whatever destination you're looking for.
Yes.
Um, and if you want more advice about how to learn Arabic, what are the skills of language acquisition, what are just like some fun things to start with, then you can come to my blog, Marhabtain Arabic.com. It's right below in the description. And you'll find tons of stuff here. Yes. And I think I'll start posting a bit more videos and articles. I realize we are in a very visual culture. And it just might be a bit easier to acquire information as you're on the go by turning on a video versus reading. So I'm going to maybe start skewing a little bit more in that direction. And I wanted to start with Rose Gold because you're such an amazing person, one of my very best friends, and a real example of how to take this journey of language acquisition in a very deep way and not in a superficial way. And I think in a very heart-spaced way, a very human way. So thank you for your time, Rose. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Uchechi, for this conversation. I appreciate that. And keep going for all of your listeners. That you're building. You're doing amazing things.
Thank you. Okay, so everyone listening, peace out. We'll see you next time.
Bye.